This is a podcast by the Straits Times.
Hello, I'm Lynda Hong, Assistant Podcast Editor for the Straits Times. You're listening to In Your Opinion, a podcast series by the Straits Times that takes a hard look at social issues of the day. Today, as co-host, I have a business correspondent from the Straits Times. Tell us what we're going to discuss about in this episode, Suen Tan.
We are going to talk about $2 million HDB flats. There aren't any for now, as the authorities have clarified that the two listings in Sengkang and Toa Payoh are misleading and unrealistic. So the question is, how did such $2 million listings even come about? Are such inflated price claims really credible, especially since we have already seen a record number of $1 million flats in the first quarter of 2024?
With us, we have a long-time property observer, and he has been often featured in our news story, Nicholas Mak, who is now Chief Research Officer of Mogul.sg, a property research portal. Welcome to the show, Nicholas.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Nicholas, the two listings that asked for $2 million, one claimed to be a jumbo flat in Sengkang, but the listing turned out to be two adjacent 5-room flats. So they are actually not eligible to be converted and sold as a single unit. As for the Toa Payoh flat, the $2 million listing price was nearly $500,000, higher than the highest transacted price in the area. So why are the agents and sellers pushing such listings?
Well, firstly, is from the agent's point of view, they feel that they have a duty to represent the buyers and to push for the best interest of the buyers, which is to try to get the highest possible price in the market. But most agents are also realistic, knowing that if you ask for too high a price, the buyers wouldn't agree. So for these two agents who are asking for very high unrealistic price, there could be a few reasons. One possible reason is they are testing the market, trying to see whether or not there's someone that might come in with a counter offer of maybe 1.9, 1.8, something lower than 2 million. The second possible reason is that these agents may belong to a group that have more than one HDB flats for sale. So they could have a handful, 10, 20 other HDB flats for sale. So if they ask for $2 million, the other flats will seem comparatively cheaper, even if they are asking for $1.2 or $1.3 million. The third possible reason is that they are trying to create FOMO, the fear of missing out, to let the public feel that, HDB flat prices are rising so rapidly that I better go in and buy now, even if the prices are above $1 million.
So would we actually call this like pure greed on the part of the agents, and like where does the professional responsibility come in then?
Well, I think the authorities have stepped in, and the guideline is that the asking price should not be more than 10% of the last transacted price in that neighborhood. But bear in mind that basically for the last 10 years, HDB resale price index has increased by an average of 2.8% a year. So even an asking price of 10% above the last transacted price, which could be just a few months ago, is already quite a generous increase in the asking price.
Right, and when we look at such $2 million listings, what effect do you think this will have on the market? Like even on the buyer psychologically, for example?
Well, I'm glad that the authorities have stepped in and put an end to this episode. Otherwise, if these two agents are allowed to advertise their flats for $2 million, other agents may follow. And this will have a ripple effect through the market, making people think that HDB flats are actually that expensive and unaffordable. And this could also encourage other owners, maybe their flats valuation could be less than $1 million, to start asking for a few $100,000 more than what their flats are valued at. So this will actually have an inflationary effect on the entire HDB resale market.
We've also seen how $1 million flats have made its way to become a norm over 10 years ago. And recently, we saw HDB transactions crossing the $1.5 million mark. And then $1.7 million was transacted for a 5-room flat in Margaret Drive. With so many barriers being broken, do you think we might see transactions in the $2 million range very soon?
I think we need to put the whole $1 million flats market into context. In 2023, the number of $1 million flats only make up about 1.8% of the total number of HDB resale flats transacted in that year. In the first half of this year, that proportion has increased to 3% of the total number of flats sold. So yes, proportionately, they have increased, but they are still at the fraction of all the HDB flats that have been transacted. As for whether or not the record price of HDB resale flats will eventually rise to $2 million, over the last 10 years, the HDB resale price index increased at an average rate of 2.8% per year, which means that at this average rate of growth, it will take 10.4 years for the price of HDB resale flats to grow to $2 million. But if a HDB resale flats were to be transacted at $2 million, that means they will have a lot of other flats transacted between $1 to $2 million, which means that the value of our money will have depreciated, which means, like for example, the price of your average plate of chicken rice would have to rise from $5 to about $8 even at the hawker center. In the end, it doesn't really spell good news for everyone. It basically means that our bank account, our paycheck, has now shrunk in its purchasing power.
Right, so would a $2 million flat actually be sustainable and affordable for the general public then?
Well, I think that if that were to happen, based on my estimation, in 10 years' time, well, all our salaries will also have to increase by about 33% just to keep pace with the cost of living. In the end, it just simply means that what we can buy today with $10 will be buying a lot less in the future. So if, for example, if we were to turn back the clock 10 years ago, and if someone were to say that, we are going to see more than $50 million flats transacted a month, people will say, well, that's a bit crazy, but it is happening now. So who's to say that in 10 years from now, there won't be a HDB resale flat breaking that $2 million barrier? It is possible, but I hope that it will happen much longer than 10 years in the future.
Right, and you also brought up a really good point, which is that the proportion of $1 million flats is actually not a lot, right, in comparison to the total number of flats. So do you think that this whole $1 million phenomenon only affects the minority of buyers who look for flats in the central areas?
Yes, but however, the $1 million flats are now in the way spreading. We are also seeing a very small number of flats being transacted at $1 million at Yishun, at other places like Clementi and so on. So it is spreading. And I think one of the reasons is because of the rising prices of private condominiums. If someone were to go into the market and say, I'm actually like to buy a 3-bedroom private condominium in, let's say, a certain location, say Toa Payoh, they may have to pay close to $2 million to $2.5 million for that family-sized condo unit. But if they were to buy a HDB resale flat and the flat is asking for $1 million, that sounds like it's half price of a condominium unit. And usually these $1 million flats are located on higher floors, more breezy, nicer view than the $2 million condo unit. So to some of these buyers, seems like that $1 million flat is a good purchase, especially if some of them are new citizens. So they may come from countries where the standard of public housing is fairly low. So in a way, that $1 million HDB flats phenomenon, in a way, is a sign of success of our public housing market, if we were to look at it from another perspective. That means our housing HDB flats are so successful, so beautiful, so attractive, that there are new citizens, well, be it new citizens or current Singapore born and bred citizens, are willing to pay a large price for it. But I think it's the whole public and private housing market, in a way, is interlinked. We will not have $1 million flats if not for the fact that the 99 years mass market condominium of the same size of 3-bedroom unit are actually also increasing at the pace of going up to $2 million each. And that actually, in a way, leave that vacuum in between to pull up the price of HDB resale flats in that neighborhood.
Right, so having said all this, what should potential buyers do then? Should they wait for BTO flats instead?
Well, my recommendation is that for eligible buyers who can buy HDB BTO flat, especially first-timers, yes, please explore what the HDB has to offer, because the HDB BTO flats are affordable. They are, in a way, subsidized by the government. And yes, they do come with restrictions. Yes, they might be slightly longer time, and there will also be balloting, especially for the more popular estates. But they are the best and affordable options for people who might have budgetary constraints.
So speaking of BTOs, then we've seen it being classified as standard, plus, and prime from October's launch, right? So do you see it having a short-term impact on the property market?
I think the new classification of HDB flats into standard, plus, and prime flats will have both a short-term impact as well as a long-term impact. The short-term impact is that some of the buyers who are either unable to get that flat, especially in the popular estate, or are unwilling to accept some of the restrictions, such as the 10-year minimum occupation period, would probably turn to buy resale flats in that same neighborhood. Like, for example, in the central area, in Ang Mo Kio, Bishan, or in the Kallang Whampoa area, where some currently and also in the future, some of these prime flats are located, some of the buyers will turn to the resale market, which in a way would drive up demand there and could also create more million-dollar flats. The longer-term impact is that this 10 years MOP, in a way, lock up the buyer from entering the resale market for the next 10 years. So in the long term is that we are going to see fewer HDB upgraders, because currently after 5 years MOP, they can sell their flats and upgrade or move to another location. But the 10-year MOP double their holding period, and in a way, in theory, half the number of HDB upgraders. This, of course, depends on how many BTO flats will come with this 10-year MOP. I think that the long-term impact is that we might see lower demand from HDB upgraders due to the 10-year MOP, and also possibly this will also have a ripple effect on the mass market private housing segment.
So, Nicholas, just now you've also mentioned about how it would actually take 10.4 years for us to reach that $2 million mark based on the current increase, right? And then you've also mentioned just now that possibly we might have fewer upgraders in time to come. So do you think that in time to come, with this 2 million mark and with the fact that there are actually new classification, we are actually going to see a slower rate of increase before we actually reach that $2 million mark? Or do you think that there'll be more regulations that come up to cool the property market, like maybe playing with the mortgage servicing ratio for HDB buyers now?
The government actually has more levers to manage the public housing market compared to the private housing market. And like, for example, HDB is basically a monopoly. Nobody else can build HDB flats and decide on the price of BTO flats than the HDB. So the government can come up with use a few measures to try to manage the price growth of HDB flats, such as increasing the supply of BTO flats. But this is also limited by the land that is available to build HDB flats. Secondly, is that they can increase the subsidy or grants to make HDB BTO flats more affordable and also to encourage home ownership. However, the cost is that it will draw on the nation's financial reserves. A third measure that they can examine is to put in restrictions to prevent people from using HDB flats as investment assets, such as, like for example, if they don't need the HDB flat anymore, some people may buy a private condo, move into the private condo and rent out the entire HDB flats. So I think in some of the new regulations that come out, such as flats that are classified as prime, I'm not sure about plus yet because the regulations has not been fully announced, is that it will prevent people from renting out the entire flat. So these are some of the measures that the government can use to try to cool the public housing market.
Nicholas, you're a long-time property observer and you've seen actually the first $1 million resale flat coming out. And then we've also seen how ABSD was introduced, also MSR. So in your opinion, do you think that we will actually one day see resale flats hitting the $2 million mark and it being unaffordable for Singaporeans in time to come?
I think the provision of affordable public housing is one of the social contract that the PAP government has with the Singapore population. And I think that this, in a way, unwritten social contract will continue. The government is determined to provide affordable housing through the BTO program, because the government allows HDB flat owners to sell their flats and buy their flats in the open market. In a way, it is up to the open market, willing buyer and willing seller, to decide on the price. For a HDB flat to reach $1 million or even $2 million, there must be a willing buyer, someone willing to pay that price, which means that if there is a certain HDB flat that can command that kind of price, the nearby private 99 years mass market condominium would reach roughly about $4 million, which means that by that stage, probably our salary will also need to double. Otherwise, very few people will be able to afford that kind of HDB flats. And also the other thing is whether or not the price of BTO flats will also increase. Because in a way, if the government were to supply sufficient BTO flats at affordable prices, this is a way of drawing demand away from the resale market. And this can help to cool the resale market and also delay the eventual scenario where we might see HDB flats reaching $2 million.
I have one more question actually, which is on the buyer's side. So if the buyer sees a $2 million listing, which has been said to be unrealistic, right? How do they make that discernment between whether a listing is realistic or not? For example, do they make their own comparison with other houses in the area?
The HDB actually has provided some information on their website to help home buyers, whether you're buying a BTO flat or HDB resale flat, to make an informed decisions. Other sources, if you search the internet, there are also other portals that might provide advice and such. But of course, I would say turn to the more authoritative websites to get more reliable information. So I think that we shouldn't get too hung up on these $1 million flats because they are only making up about 2 to 3% of the resale markets. There are still quite a large number of affordable resale flats out there. And also for first-time home buyers, there's also the availability of some grants from the government to buy your first resale flats. Another thing is about our improvement of our transportation infrastructure. In the earlier days, some of the $1 million flats are located near MRT stations. But right now, we have more than 100 MRT stations all across the island, which means that there is actually no need to pay a very high price for $1 million flats located in the central region near an MRT station, because there are also MRT stations in other parts, in the more outer regions of Singapore, that actually can connect you to wherever you want to go in the rest of Singapore. So my advice is buy within your means. The rule of thumb is that you should not be using more than a quarter of your disposable income to pay for your accommodation. So if you can use, let's say, just your CPF funds to pay for your housing mortgage without using your cash, I think that would be a very comfortable financial positions especially for first-time home buyers.
Well, that's a wrap for In Your Opinion. Thank you, Nicholas, for your insights. Always a pleasure to speak with you and glad to finally have you on our show.
Thank you very much, Lynda. The pleasure is all mine.
I'm Lynda Hong.
And I'm Suen Tan. You can email us your thoughts on this issue. Also, if you'd like to read my articles and ST's opinion columns, all these links are in our podcast show notes. Thanks for listening.
Send your feedback to podcast@sph.com.sg. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or within our Straits Times app. Thanks for listening.